Yo, give this video a thumbs up for that intro featuring the Pixel 10 Pro. Now, this is the latest release from Google, and although it just came out, it's already getting a ton of mixed reviews with a bunch of love and hate. As an art director and photographer who loves tech, I've been using this phone for over a week and I can kind of see both sides. The Pixel 10 Pro has significant improvements, but also some notable drawbacks, which we will definitely get into. But first, full disclaimer, I bought this phone with my own money to test out and review, so this video is not paid or sponsored. This way I can stay as unbiased as possible and give you guys an honest review. So as you're watching this video, let me know in the comments what your experience has been if you also upgraded to this device. After spending some time setting up and using this phone, it's clear that a lot of these changes don't come across visually or on a spec sheet. And since this phone just came out, it's not nearly enough time for a full in-depth review. So I'll touch on some first impressions and focus this video mostly around the cameras because that's what I use the most in my day-to-day life. We'll take a look at a bunch of samples and dive into Lightroom to pixel peep at those 50 megapixel images as well as some raw files. I spent a bunch of time testing out the various shooting modes and figuring out which camera settings are the best, so definitely stick around for that. Alright, let's get right into it. Immediately after unboxing the Pixel 10 Pro, I noticed this build quality feels premium and substantial. For its small size, there is a heft to this device. And for those who are upgrading from an older generation Pixel like the Pixel 8 and older, I'm happy to report the hollow screen feeling is not present. The Pixel 10 Pro really feels like a solidly built phone. However, the obsidian color is not nearly as dark as I expected. It's definitely closer to a charcoal gray rather than a black. The rails are also extremely shiny, which catches the light and looks nice in videos, but honestly, when you're using it, they get covered in fingerprints. I think a true black device with matte rails would look incredible, but maybe next year. Besides the new colors, visually it's minimally different from the previous generation, which could be disappointing if you are looking for the upgrade to feel fresh and new. Another point of contention is the removal of the SIM card tray. Although the eSIM is pretty easy to set up through most carriers in the US, it still is a hassle for those who travel, as not every country has widespread eSIM support. On the bottom, the SIM tray was replaced with a speaker grill, however, it produces no sound. It's probably just for a microphone since covering it doesn't affect the sound output. But I'm happy to say that the speakers do sound great and they sound a lot better than the 9 Pro Fold that I was using. Overall, I love this more compact form factor compared to the Pixel 9 Pro XL. Using this device feels much more natural and I wish more manufacturers would create Pro versions in smaller sizes. It's truly a joy to use and I love how they didn't compromise on specs and gave us the same cameras as the XL versions. Speaking of cameras, the hardware this year is pretty similar to last year, with the 50 megapixel main sensor with the 48 megapixel ultra wide and telephoto lenses. The cameras on the Pixel 9 Pro were already so good that I didn't really expect too many changes for the 10. However, there still are some minor changes that affect the shooting experience, which we will get into. Over the Labor Day weekend, we traveled to Wildwood, New Jersey and was able to capture a bunch of content. Between the boardwalk, to the amusement park, and the beach, I was really able to test out these cameras. Shooting with the primary lens in the standard 12 megapixel mode will net you really great photos no matter the condition. It truly is just a point and shoot device and you can trust the phone to take a good photo. I am always impressed with how well the pixels are able to render colors and detail in such a natural way. The photos don't look over-processed or over-sharpened. However, like previous Pixels, it does tend to raise shadows a bit too much. Personally, I like a darker, moodier look, and I'm happy to say that it's easy to adjust just by tapping on the screen and using those quick adjustment sliders. And for more granular control, you also have Pro Mode, which gives you more access to all the settings like shutter speed and ISO. And while we're digging through this menu, another camera setting I immediately change is disabling the automatic lens switching. Because I really don't like how the phone sometimes doesn't change to the 5x telephoto lens. So by enabling the manual lens selection, you have full control over which lens you are using to shoot with. And if you're serious about photography, I would enable the RAW files as well as the 50 megapixel mode, with some caveats. Although the 5x telephoto lens has the same reach as last year, it is technically a new lens and does come with some quirks. Generally, it is able to capture really great shots, similar to the main lens, Both colors and detail look decent. However, I've noticed sometimes it takes a bit longer to lock in focus and it tends to hunt a bit more. It also has a dual minimum focusing distance depending on what mode you're shooting in. So in auto, you can see that it's not able to focus on the center of this test chart and it barely focuses on the outer edge. But if I were to go into the Pro controls and select the manual focus slider, it's able to focus a lot closer. I'm not exactly sure why there's this discrepancy because clearly the lens is capable of focusing closer, but they just don't allow it in auto mode. And after using this phone a bunch, it's clear that most of the changes has come from the software side and the processing of the images. So let's dive into Lightroom for this segment because we really need the pixel peep to see what's going on. The most controversial feature is the ProRes zoom from 30 to 100x. With the help of some AI magic, the device is able to analyze the blurry image and generate details to fill in the gaps. When this works, it's quite impressive. But to me, it's taking it a bit too far and it's no longer a real photo anymore, especially since some users have reported this AI generating things that just doesn't even exist in the original photo. However, the good thing is that Google does give you both the original file along with the AI generated one, and you can easily toggle and select which one you want to keep within your gallery. Speaking of the zoom, I really like this new software feature where you can use the volume buttons to quickly toggle the zoom level. This is really useful because you no longer have to try to pinch the zoom or slide your finger to hit at those exact zoom levels. This allows you to just jump to them straight away. I also did a bunch of testing with the standard 12 megapixel 2x zoom versus cropping in manually with a 50 megapixel image. And no contest, the 50 megapixel mode wins out pretty much every time. And like I said earlier, if you're serious about photography, that 50 megapixel mode is really what you want to be shooting in. In this side-by-side comparison, you can see the amount of detail that the 50 megapixel mode is able to capture. It gives you much more flexibility in post to crop and edit. However, be aware that you are only able to capture 2 or 3 photos in quick succession before the phone starts to lag and the shutter button is grayed out. This was an issue that I talked about in my previous Pixel reviews, and it's unfortunate that Google was not able to fix this with the new Tensor chip. I also noticed the phone tends to heat up quite a bit, and although it's never reached thermal throttling, it is a bit concerning, especially because it wasn't even that hot out. And lastly, another downside to the 50 megapixel mode is low light performance. Because there's less processing and noise reduction involved, the images you get are a bit grainier. To me, this is okay because I don't really mind a little bit of grain, but I know that some people prefer a much cleaner looking image straight out of the camera. And while we're in Lightroom, let's take a look at some raw files and see how they perform. This first file is a 50 megapixel image taken with a telephoto, and you can see the colors look great. The exposure is also relatively flat and even across the frame. However, after zooming in at 100%, you can see a good amount of softness. Although it's not horrible, the details are definitely muddy. Unprocessed RAW files usually have some softness, but this is a little bit disappointing. However, you can somewhat correct this with the sharpness and dehaze sliders in Lightroom. On a positive note, the things that I love about Pixel RAW files is how easy they are to edit. You can see how the different presets affect the tones and colors of the image. I like this one for a more vintage film look because it matches the vibe of the photo. And here you can see a quick before and after. Next, let's take a look at an ultra wide shot. Zooming into the center of the frame, you can see it looks pretty sharp. Smaller details like the light bulbs and the metal framing are all pretty clear. I'm actually pretty impressed because even panning to the edges and the extreme corners of the frame, you can see it's able to retain a good level of sharpness with minimal smearing. Again, going through my preset system quickly, I'm able to settle on the cinematic one to further enhance the orange and blue tones that are already in this shot. Then I just need to make some minor global adjustments, and this is the quick before and after. Lastly, let's take a look at a raw file taken at night. Zooming into the center of the frame with some of these lights reveal a good amount of detail and low noise. It's not the darkest area because of all these lights coming from the restaurant, but I am still pretty impressed with this file. Panning into some of the darker areas like the night sky, you can see a lot more noise there. Lightroom has built-in denoise filters to remove most of that. So zooming into this new file, you can see how much cleaner that looks. Now I'm just wrapping up this edit with a preset, a quick alignment, and a crop. If you guys are interested and want to edit your photos like this, check out the link in the description and you can support me by purchasing my preset system. As far as video goes, it seems to be slightly improved compared to last year, but again, no real generational leaps. The stabilization on the main sensor seems to work better because panning around looks smoother and more natural. However, there still aren't advanced features for video like Pro Controls or the ability to shoot in log or a flat format. But if you are serious about video, it appears that Google has allowed for 12-bit recording with DCG on third-party apps. Now, I'm not an expert in this by any means, so I'm going to link a video from Epic tutorials that go in depth about this. Basically, this 12-bit recording should allow for much higher video quality, and the dual ISOs should allow for more clean video. And lastly, to wrap up this camera segment, let's touch on some of the software like conversational editing. Again, it utilizes AI to help edit and enhance the photo, so you have to be okay with that level of manipulation. The good thing is that Google will watermark the image, which is a step in the right direction. As far as the feature itself, I couldn't really get it to work all that well. It kept generating new images, like completely new images, instead of editing the existing one. I tried with a bunch of different files, both 50 megapixel as well as the standard 12 megapixel files, and usually it just doesn't work right. So this feature still seems pretty buggy. And lastly, I want to touch on performance with the Tensor G5 because I know this is a hotly debated topic. This chip was pretty hyped up before the launch. However, as people started getting their devices and were posting benchmark scores, it seems that there really isn't that much of an improvement. It's clear that the performance of the Pixel 10 Pro still lags behind other flagships from Samsung and Apple. But honestly, in my day-to-day use, I didn't really notice any downsides. Besides the lag when capturing 50 megapixel files, the performance is generally pretty fluid. Sometimes it does get a bit warm, but again, I didn't really notice any thermal throttling. Editing RAW files in Lightroom is a breeze, and I even downloaded a few games to test out and play. Everything ran pretty well. I mean, there are some minor frame drops here and there, but it's honestly not that terrible. Is it the best performer? Probably not. But if you're that serious about mobile gaming, they do make phones with built-in cooling that can definitely outperform this by a lot. One game that I did notice graphical issues with was Destiny Rising. There were these black squares and it was unplayable. However, diving into the dev settings and changing the OpenGL driver to Angle fixed this issue. I really hope that some of these performance issues are just due to early drivers and could be fixed with a software update. But again, we'll have to see how that pans out, and I'll definitely make an updated video to let you guys know. So if top-notch performance is really important to you, then I would hold off on purchasing this phone for now. So to wrap things up, you can see the Pixel 10 Pro is a pretty mixed bag. It has a ton of pros, but also a few cons that could be deal breakers. However, if it's anything like the previous generation, then it definitely should get better with software updates. But even in its current state, I think it's a worthy successor to Pixels or other devices that are a little bit older. If you have the Pixel 9 Pro already, then it might not be as worth it to upgrade. Battery life is another one of those things where I have to see how it settles, but currently I'm getting around 4 to 6 hours of screen on time depending on usage. But again, since I'm using the more compact Pixel 10 Pro, I don't really expect battery to be the best given its size. Material 3 Expressive has been a joy to use, and the haptics really pair well with those micro animations that they've added throughout the software. However, it's not unique to the Pixel 10 Pro anymore because by the time this video is uploaded, a lot of the older Pixels have also gotten this update. Overall, the Pixel 10 Pro feels like a polished package where no single feature is a huge standout, but everything works really well together to deliver that Pixel experience. Let me know if you have any questions and I'll try to answer them in the comments below. And if you want to support my channel, please subscribe. I'm definitely working on a long-term review video for this device, so subscribing also means that you won't miss that video when it comes out. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you next time. Peace.